It's crime time here on Closing Arguments. Let's introduce tonight's guest. Joining us, former Lieutenant Lisa Daddio. Lisa has spent approximately 16 years in the Detective Division. She served as Detective Sergeant and Lieutenant, commanding the Major Crimes Unit. She is now a lecturer and coordinator of the Master's Program in Forensic Technology at the Henry C. Lee College of Criminal Justice and Forensic Sciences. Also with us, retired Los Angeles Police Department Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. Sergeant Dorsey started with the LAPD in 1980. She worked in patrol and specialized units, including gangs, and she's the author of Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate. Great to have you both back with us here on the show. And as you know, and the world knows, we are covering the case against Derek Chauvin, the former officer charged with murdering George Floyd. And during the course of jury selection, there's a lot of questions and answers involving police and policing. So I wanted to listen to some of the things the jurors said and get your take on it. Let's begin with what Juror 109 was talking about.
You were asked the question, police in my community make me feel safe, and you somewhat agreed with that. Why do you feel less safe or somewhat disagree with the notion that police keep you safe?
Because I haven't really seen any on our streets lately, so I feel that it makes our city unsafe. If you don't see police, your criminals are going to do crime.
Right. Do you think it was different before the rioting and things happened in the city?
Yeah, I think their presence was very visible.
Okay. You strongly disagreed with the notion of defunding the Minneapolis Police Department.
Yeah, I think it's an idiotic idea.
All right. A couple of things that he's talking about here, but the first thing, Sergeant Dorsey, that he's talking about is that he feels less safe after the death of George Floyd because he's seeing less police on the streets of the city. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, certainly police presence can be a deterrent in and of itself. But, these questions are very carefully crafted, and they're designed to get a pro-police jury. And so that's what they're looking for, and it sounds like that's what they got. Because at the end of the day, Derek Chauvin is not going to be on trial. George Floyd is.
Lisa, what do you think of that notion that after the death of George Floyd, at least Juror 109, who lives in the area, felt like police were less present in the city?
It's really hard to judge if that is an accurate representation of law enforcement there. He may feel that way because now he's kind of more in tune to it. Maybe there's other stuff going on where he's not seeing law enforcement in his community as much as he had. It's hard without having all the facts to actually make a determination whether or not one has anything to do with the other, or is it just that he's more keen and aware of it because now he's been selected as a potential jury on the trial.
All right,
juror, I should say.
Let me ask you something, Sergeant, because and other jurors have talked about police officers in that area kind of antagonizing members of the community. So where's the balance where you want police presence as a deterrence, but you don't want to antagonize? Because somewhere in the middle there is what we need, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's a balance for the officers to strike. The only problem is, Vinny, is that we don't often see that. We see officers treating people of color, folks who look like me, very differently than they do white folks. Let's just be clear. Let's just be honest. I'm calling a thing a thing. And so that's why we have such disparity and such distrust because of the disparity in the way that officers treat folks.
So, Lisa, how does the trust get built? Does it get built by being there and being present and being visible? And then how do you strike that balance to where the community doesn't feel like they're being antagonized at the same time?
You have to work together. You need to communicate. You need to create a partnership with the community. Policing and the community should be one and not two separate entities. Working in New Haven, Connecticut for over 20 years, we worked with our community and things were good. Were they always perfect? Of course not. The field of policing is far from perfect, as we know. dating back over hundreds of years when the history of policing actually began. But there has to be a partnership, there has to be an open dialogue, and we have to listen and communicate with one another.
I want to take a listen to another juror now. This is juror 99, and this is interesting as well. Her view of the 4 officers in this case.
You were asked to state your general impression of the defendants generally. You wrote other, or you checked the box other, and you wrote, I have different impressions for each individual defendant. I do not view them all the same. So can you just explain what you meant by that, only as it pertains to Mr. Chauvin? How would you view Mr. Chauvin in relation to the others?
I feel like he took a different role in the situation versus the other officers.
How do you mean?
More like the leader.
Okay. And do you assign him more blame as a result of that role?
I do not.
You do not?
I do not.
Okay. You just view that he was perhaps a superior or senior officer on the scene, and that's it?
Yes.
Versus other officers who may have been newer to the force, younger, less experienced?
Correct.
All right, so there are 4 officers that were there that day, Sergeant Dorsey. You've got Derek Chauvin, the one who's on trial with his knee on George Floyd's neck. You've got the 2 rookies who are next to him. That's King and Lane. And then you've got Tu Tao, who is in charge of snarky comments and crowd control. How did you see the roles of all of them that day, Sergeant?
Well, understanding, police culture and how the hierarchy works, Chauvin was the senior officer there. These other younger officers, I think one had only been out of the police academy for 4 years. And so, although these are adult men, as a probationary officer, as a rookie, you're basically taught during your time in the academy to be like a child, to be seen and not heard. And so they're going to defer to the senior officer, Chauvin, and I would imagine that he probably has a personality and a reputation around that police department for one who does foolishness like we saw him do, and you just want to make it through the day. He's going to get involved in something that could be jeopardizing your career, but you just want to get through that shift. And so these officers did the best that they could, given who they were and the prominence that Chauvin held on that department.
Lisa, how did you see the various roles that day?
We always go back to, especially being the younger officers compared to the senior officers, you look to the senior officers for guidance, for how they handle things. It's hard to know what the true picture is of all the officers there, because we only know, obviously, what has been put out there to the public and what their working relationship is. Everybody that works in an agency knows the true inner workings of everybody else in the agency, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. So, in this entire case and how it kind of unraveled, I agree they probably were looking at their senior officer as being in charge of the scene, and they all kind of took a step back from it.
All right, our experts will stay with us. We've got more Crime Time straight ahead, plus this. Big developments during day 9 of jury selection in the death of George Floyd murder trial, and a major ruling by the judge that will allow the defense to show a video of George Floyd being arrested 1 year before he died. We break down what this will all mean with our legal think tank. And have you seen or heard anything that has changed your mind about what happened the day George Floyd died? Go to our Facebook pages and let us know. Today, in the death of George Floyd murder trial, a 13th juror was seated in the case. Court TV cameras inside the courtroom. And at the top of the hour, Court TV legal correspondent Julie Janae will be joining us to talk about the big decision made by the judge today in allowing part of the body cam footage from George Floyd's 2019 arrest to be admitted in evidence during Derek Chauvin's trial. But first, let's bring back our law enforcement experts in for more Crime Time. Still with us, Lisa Daddio and Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. Our next story from the Metro Nashville Police Department. A woman swings a pickaxe, 'Axe, at an officer.
Melissa, what is going on today? What's the deal?
Look, I'm not talking to anybody. Y'all need to shoot me or
Okay.
kill me right now.
I understand. I hear what you're saying, but what happened? Would you take something today?
Well, I drink alcohol, but that's it.
Melissa, please. Nobody is going to kill you. No one is going to harm you. You know how this ends?
Y'all can taser me, go ahead and taser me, and I'll fucking right up and kill me at this point.
Melissa, come on. I know, but let's just set it down and talk. Let's at least go that route. Please.
Set one of them down.
No, I'm not.
Just one of them. There's no reason for me to pull my weapon on you, okay?
Give me a bullet in my head. That's the only
Can we agree that this is not working out? Like something's off right now, obviously, right?
Obviously, there's something wrong.
Keep your distance.
That's not.
No, just stop right there.
What are you doing? I'm not talking stuff. This is what I'm
Did she
saying.
take
She's
anything?
mentally ill.
Okay.
I planned for them to come here
That's
to
what she wants to.
If you start to take me out-
They are not gonna shoot you. Put that down. I'm gonna beat you up.
Please don't get too close to her, because then it's
I'm
my.
not scared of her.
I understand that, but it's my responsibility if something happens to
Melissa
you.
Lynn,
Mama,
put that stuff down now.
I will kill my. No,
Put it
Why
down.
don't you walk over here with us?
I'll I'm not.
Oh my God.
That's what we're gonna try to do.
Oh my
We're gonna resolve it
She's
peacefully.
a good kid. She just messed up in the head. Oh my God.
We're gonna resolve it peacefully.
Sorry, Mom, but I'll be resting in peace with Jesus and friended by the
Yeah, not gonna happen. Whoa. Easy, ma'am, back away from her.
Don't do
Back
that,
away from her. Back
Don't
away
do
from her. I'm gonna take the key out of this thing, okay? Taser. Come, get. Shots fired. We have 2 shots fired.
What?
Roll over.
I know you didn't.
All right, that woman was in stable condition after surviving the shot, but have you ever seen an incident quite like this? I mean, you're dealing with someone with a pickaxe and a bat, and then mom comes in on the scooter, Lisa Daddio.
So not quite like that, but we have had incidents where, and I've been part of them, where there had been, people who are suffering from some type of mental illness or some type of drug-induced psychosis, if you would, having knives or a knife and threatening to harm themselves or us in law enforcement. And so thankfully, in the situations I've been involved in, as well as other officers, we were able to not have a use of force incident using our firearm. Our tasers had worked. In some cases, it just took, honestly, just tackling the person to the ground so they couldn't do any harm.
Sergeant Dorsey, a very tense situation there.
Yeah, listen, I mean, suicide by cop is a real thing, and we've seen it time and time again. Isn't it interesting, Vinny, how different officers respond when the person that they're dealing with looks like them? They spent over 6 minutes talking to this young woman. Obviously, there's history. They know her. They've probably been to her home many times. They seem to have a rapport with not only her, but her and her mom. And so they did what they had to do when she charged. They fired 2 rounds in rapid succession, as we're taught. They didn't do like they do when they stop black folks, empty their magazine and then reload and then fire till your barrel melts down. And so we know that officers can show restraint when they want to. It would be nice if they treated everyone the same way they treated Melissa, armed or unarmed.
All right, our final story tonight is out of California, and Kobe Bryant's widow, Vanessa Bryant, has filed a lawsuit against some deputies. And what she is responding to is that an allegation that some of the responding officers took pictures of the bodies at the scene of the crash where Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and others lost their lives. And pictures, very, close-up pictures. And they were shared amongst colleagues. And she's now amended her lawsuit against them and on Instagram posted it and named the actual officers and put a red square around those names. Sergeant Dorsey, I'll start with you. You're in California. Your thoughts about the allegations that these officers responded to this horrific scene and were taking pictures with personal phones and allegedly, exchanging these pictures amongst themselves?
Very distasteful, but again, not uncommon. And there have been incidents, certainly here in, I believe it was in Los Angeles, where you had an officer respond to just a death investigation. A woman had died at home, and the officers were fondling her and taking pictures of her in that state. And so officers can be crude and callous, and I'm not surprised that they took the pictures, that they felt free enough to share them with one another. And so there should be a price to pay. That's very unprofessional and certainly hurtful to the family after all that they've been through, to know that people still may possess pictures that they're sharing.
Lisa Daddio, your thoughts about what happened here at the crash and the allegations?
It's horrible. Definitely poor taste. As Sergeant Dorsey had said, it's just a horrible type of thing to do. Unfortunately, with cell phones and everything now, it's more common than not, I think. And knowing what they did, and I'm sure it happens in multiple scenes now, not just in this plane crash, but where you come across these types of death scenes in particular, and you're taking pictures like, holy cow, I can't believe what I said. But in the end, it's really distasteful and something that shouldn't be done. We teach it that it's evidence. Like if it's known that you took pictures with your phone and the pictures that you took become evidence in the case. So we always say, don't do it. But obviously in this case, they did.
And that's the job of, I guess, a CSI, the crime scene investigators, that come out and take a look at the scene and take the pictures, photograph it, and collect the evidence. Wow, great to have you both here. Lisa Daddio, Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey, tremendous insight and perspective. Thank you so much. Please come back soon.
Thanks again, Vinny.
All right, folks. Well,